Known famed gator hunter Troy Landry of the show Swamp People has found himself in a little bit of hot water.
Over in Pierre Park, with his season and his career hunting gators at stake.
He seemed like the heart of the bayou, a man of few words but deep wisdom. Troy Landry, the legendary alligator hunter from the hit show, earned his fame not through glitz or glamour, but through grit, authenticity, and an unmistakable Cajun charm. But behind the catchy phrases and sun-faded camo was a truth most of us never saw coming. Swamp people. Because they warned us. Locals, old friends, even former cast members. They said there was more to Troy Landry than what made it to the screen. That under the surface of America's favorite gator hunter was a storm building. One of secrets, silence, and unspoken tensions. But fans didn't want to believe it. We saw him as the steady hand, the noble leader, the man who kept the swamp safe. And maybe that's exactly why we looked the other way. In this video, we're going to dig through the whispers, the warnings, and the hard truths that never made it into the show. From controversial hunting practices and family feuds, to emotional struggles and moments that tested everything he believed in. Because the swamp never gives up its secrets easily. And what we found about Troy Landry might just change how you see him forever. Long before he was a reality TV icon, Troy Landry was just another man on the bayou, rising with the sun, navigating the winding swamps of Pierre Park, Louisiana, and hunting alligators not for fame, but for survival. His family had been in the gator business for generations. To them, it wasn't a show, it was life. But when Swamp People premiered in 2010, everything changed. Troy quickly became the face of the show. With his signature "shoot 'em" catchphrase and calm demeanor under pressure, he was instantly beloved. Viewers saw a man who honored tradition, who valued family, and who thrived in a world that most people only read about. What they didn't see, or didn't want to see, was the pressure mounting behind the scenes. Friends say the fame weighed on him, that the sudden spotlight brought more than just money. It brought expectations, public appearances, media obligations, strangers showing up at his home. And with each season, the gap between Troy Landry the man and Troy Landry, the brand, grew wider. He used to be the most relaxed guy in town, one neighbor said. Now it's like he's always on guard. And that was just the beginning. On screen, the Landry family seemed like a tight-knit crew. Generations of hunters passing down wisdom and tradition, bound by blood and bayou. But insiders say the truth was far more complicated. Troy often worked alongside his sons, Jacob and Chase, and for viewers, the dynamic looked like a dream. A father mentoring his boys, laughing between hunts, always united against the perils of the swamp. But when cameras stopped rolling, tensions surfaced. Multiple sources close to the family say disagreements about money, fame, and the direction of the show began to take a toll. Jacob, known for being the more stoic and reliable of the sons, reportedly clashed with producers over how much control they had over his father's time. He felt Troy was being pushed too hard, too often, and that the show was changing the man he knew. Chase, on the other hand, was more willing to embrace the celebrity. He did interviews. He leaned into the fame. And that didn't always sit well with Troy, who, despite his growing recognition, remained deeply uncomfortable with the spotlight. They didn't fight in front of the cameras, a crew member shared anonymously, but you could feel it. Tension, especially when decisions were being made about who would get more airtime. It wasn't just about screen time. It was about legacy. Troy had built his reputation on quiet integrity. His sons, raised in that same world, now found themselves navigating a much noisier one. By season 9, Troy appeared noticeably more withdrawn during interviews. His trademark smile came a little slower, and fans started asking questions. Was he tired? Was he sick? Or was something else going on? Those close to him say it was the weight of holding everything together, the show, the family, the myth of Troy Landry, and it was starting to show. He loves his boys, a longtime friend said, but even love can be strained when the cameras don't stop rolling. For years, Swamp People was celebrated for showing a raw, unfiltered look at one of America's oldest professions, alligator hunting. But as the show gained popularity, so did scrutiny over its portrayal of the hunt, and Troy Landry found himself at the center of it. While most fans admired Troy for upholding tradition and respecting the animals he hunted, wildlife activists and conservation groups began raising red flags. They argued that the show sensationalized the violence, turning what was once a necessary act of survival into reality TV entertainment. One episode in particular, where Troy pulled in a massive gator with a single shot to the head while cracking a joke for the cameras, drew sharp criticism online. "This isn't hunting," one viral tweet read. "This is showboating." Behind the scenes, it stung. Troy, who had always prided himself on being ethical, only hunting during legal season, never taking more than his tags allowed, was suddenly being labeled as cruel by people who had never set foot in the swamp. And that criticism didn't just come from outsiders. Some local hunters began to distance themselves from the show entirely. One Louisiana native said, "The minute you put a camera on a boat, it stops being real. Troy's a good man, but TV changes people." That sentiment echoed louder as the years went on. Even within his own crew, debates broke out. Should they be pushing for more drama, bigger gators, riskier stunts? Troy was caught between two worlds: the quiet, respectful traditions he was raised in, and the ever-growing hunger of a national audience demanding more action. Some say it started to eat at him. He hated having to redo shots, a producer once admitted. He wanted things real, but real doesn't always make good TV. By the time Swamp People hit its 10th season, the show had begun to feel like a performance, even for Troy. The pressure to keep ratings high, to deliver one-liners, to always be the king of the swamp. It began chipping away at the authenticity that made fans fall in love with him in the first place. And as the cameras rolled, few realized just how much he was sacrificing to keep the legend alive. In the middle of the show's rising success, something happened that was quietly kept from the public. A medical emergency that nearly changed everything for Troy Landry. It began with subtle signs: fatigue that wouldn't go away, weight loss that friends attributed to stress, and recurring pain in his lower back and abdomen. At first, Troy brushed it off. He was used to hard labor. Swamp work took a toll. Pain was part of the job, but it got worse. According to insiders close to the family, it was a visit to the doctor, reluctantly scheduled after his wife, Miss Liz, pushed for answers, that revealed a serious problem. Troy had a tumor in his bladder. The diagnosis sent shockwaves through the Landry household. He kept it quiet, telling only a few close friends. At the time, the show was in production, and Troy refused to let his illness become part of the storyline. He didn't want sympathy, one friend said. He didn't want to be seen as weak. The surgery came quickly. He was in and out of the hospital within a matter of days, but the recovery was longer. And mentally, the experience left a mark. For a man whose life revolved around physical strength, pulling gators, hauling gear, long days on the water, the idea of his body failing him was terrifying. He returned to the show quietly. Viewers noticed he seemed slower, more deliberate. Some thought he was just aging. Few knew he was recovering from a life-altering operation. And through it all, Troy never spoke publicly about his diagnosis until much later, in a rare off-camera interview where he acknowledged it briefly. "I had a little health scare, but I'm all right now. Still got a few more hunts in me." But behind that smile, those close to him saw a shift. He became more reflective, one crew member said, less concerned with being the face of the show, more focused on spending time with his family, on preserving the traditions, not just performing them. It was a turning point, not just in his health, but in his outlook. The man who once shouldered the weight of a franchise started to set it down, and finally ask himself what really mattered. Fame changes people, sometimes subtly, sometimes all at once. And for Troy Landry, a man who never sought the spotlight, the transformation was especially difficult. Unlike other reality stars who chased endorsement deals and Instagram fame, Troy remained grounded in his roots. He still lived in Pierre Part. He still hunted, still drove the same boat, still shopped at the same grocery store. But fame, even when uninvited, followed him everywhere. Strangers showed up at his home. Tourists would travel hours just to get a glimpse of his dock. Some fans were respectful, others crossed boundaries, asking to see his boat, his guns, even stepping onto his property without permission. "It stopped feeling like home," one relative said. "Every time he went out, someone wanted something." Troy, a man of intense privacy, struggled with the attention. He didn't want bodyguards. He didn't want to move to a gated community. But as his notoriety grew, so did the pressure to perform, even in his personal life. At restaurants, people expected him to say, "Shoot 'em," on cue. At gas stations, fans would bring Gator memorabilia for him to sign. And if he didn't oblige, some would leave angry, blasting him online as rude or ungrateful. That hurt, because Troy had never seen himself as a celebrity. He was just a hunter who happened to be on TV. Friends say he started going out less, declining more interviews, saying no to public appearances. He withdrew, not out of arrogance, but out of exhaustion. He missed the days when life was just the swamp, one friend said, when the only people he had to impress were the ones in the boat with him. And perhaps that's the greatest irony. The very thing that made Troy Landry beloved, his authenticity, his simplicity, became the thing hardest to preserve once the cameras came. He didn't ask to be famous. He just wanted to hunt. But somewhere along the way, the world asked him to be more, and expected him to stay the same. For over a decade, Swamp People gave viewers a glimpse into a world few understood. But what it didn't show, what was left on the cutting room floor, may be the most revealing part of Troy Landry's story. Several former producers and cast members have hinted that not everything was as it seemed on screen. Scenes were sometimes reshot to heighten drama. Weather conditions were altered in post-production. And perhaps most controversially, some of the hunts were filmed days apart and edited together to appear as a single event. None of this was unique to Swamp People, of course. Reality TV has always blurred the line between fact and fiction. But for someone like Troy, who valued honesty, who built a reputation on being real, this creative license became a source of inner conflict. He hated it, one former crew member said. He'd get frustrated when they asked him to say things twice or act more surprised. That's not who he is. In one instance, Troy reportedly walked off set for nearly a day after producers wanted him to fake a tense moment with another hunter. It wasn't that he couldn't act, it's that he refused to. This tension reached a breaking point in later seasons when Troy's role shifted slightly. He appeared in fewer promotional spots. His interviews became shorter, less enthusiastic, and some fans even began to notice a weariness behind his once bright eyes. What they didn't know was that Troy had been pushing back, against producers, against scripted moments, even against the idea of continuing the show altogether. He started talking about legacy, said a close family friend. Not the show's legacy, his, what he'd be remembered for, whether people would know the real Troy or just the TV version. It's a haunting thought, because while Swamp People made Troy Landry a household name, it may have also cost him part of his identity. And now, with the series winding down and Troy appearing less frequently, one question remains. Was it worth it? As the seasons rolled on and the cameras turned less frequently in his direction, Troy Landry began shifting his focus, not just to family or rest, but to the question that haunts every man who spent his life building something. What will I leave behind? Troy never wanted a statue or a museum. His legacy wasn't meant to be cast in bronze or boxed in a display case. He wanted his sons to carry on the family traditions. He wanted the bayou to remember him not as a star, but as a steward. And most of all, he wanted to protect the land. In recent years, he began working more quietly with conservation groups. Not the flashy environmentalist outfits, but local coalitions focused on restoring natural habitats damaged by hurricanes, pollution, and industrial runoff. Troy had spent his life pulling life out of the water, and now he wanted to give something back. He also began mentoring younger hunters off-camera, teaching them not just how to catch, but how to respect. Anyone can shoot a gator, he reportedly told one young recruit. Not everyone can walk away from one. There was wisdom in that. For Troy, the swamp wasn't just a job, it was sacred. And as he watched more hunters turn their craft into clickbait, filming dangerous stunts for TikTok, breaking long-standing codes of conduct for online fame, it broke his heart. He always said the swamp was honest, one friend recalled, but the people in it, they're changing. As Swamp People began scaling back production, rumors circulated that Troy might retire completely, but those who know him best say that's unlikely. He'll never stop going out, Jacob Landry said in a rare interview. Even if there's no show, no audience, that's who he is. And maybe, in the end, that's the most honest legacy a man like Troy Landry could leave behind. A life that didn't need a camera to matter. Just a boat, a bayou, and a name whispered with respect through the cypress trees. In the stillness of recent years, as the cameras rolled less and the spotlight faded, Troy Landry began to experience something unfamiliar. Time. Time to slow down. Time to reflect. Time to feel the wear and tear of decades spent under sun, mud, and pressure. And while many assumed he'd take that time to rest, those close to him saw something else. A man trying to hold on to the last pieces of who he was before the world knew his name. Reports from the production crew suggest that Troy had become more selective about filming days. If weather was rough, he might sit it out. If a segment felt overly produced, he'd quietly excuse himself. It wasn't rebellion, it was preservation. He just didn't want to fake it anymore, one longtime camera operator shared. If it wasn't real, he wasn't interested. Off-screen, his life became smaller. Not out of sadness, but by choice. Fewer public appearances. More evenings spent on the porch. More time with Miss Liz and his grandchildren. The swamp was still in his blood, but the fame? That was bleeding out. And yet, the quiet didn't mean retreat. Troy began archiving his family history, recording stories, organizing old photos, even outlining a potential book that would document the legacy of swamp culture before it was swallowed by the modern world. Not for money, not for a publisher, just for his family. He wants them to remember, one of his sons said, not the show, the way it really was. It's a powerful reminder that behind the fame, behind the catchphrases and merchandise, Troy Landry remains who he always was, a man of the swamp, a father, a quiet giant whose footsteps don't need an audience to echo. So, what do we really know about Troy Landry? We saw the gators, the boats, the grit, and the glory. We heard the catchphrases, We cheered when he pulled in giants from the deep. We thought we knew the man, but the truth, the real story, was never in the spectacle. It was in the silences. The way he walked slower each season. The way his smiles became rarer but more genuine. The way he started letting go of fame, of pressure, of the version of himself created for television. Troy Landry never asked for a camera crew. He never dreamed of stardom. And he never wanted to be the face of a franchise. He just wanted to hunt gators, protect his home, and raise his family. And in the end, maybe that's exactly what he did. Because behind all the drama and edits, the ratings and reruns, there's a deeper legacy. A man who stayed true, not to the fame, but to the life that came before it. A man who let us in, but only just enough. Who guarded his roots, even as the world tried to turn him into a brand. So the next time you see Troy Landry's face, on a rerun, in a clip, on a piece of merch, remember this: he wasn't playing a part. He was trying to hold on to who he was, while the world kept trying to turn him into something else. And in the end, maybe that's the real fight worth watching. Let us know in the comments. What do you think we missed about Troy Landry all these years? And if you want more stories like this, the quiet truths, the real behind the scenes of fame, hit subscribe. Because sometimes the loudest legends come from the quietest men